Have you ever pulled off a highway and watched a John Deere tractor crawl across a muddy field and thought, why does that thing have tires taller than a grown man? Those rear tires look almost comical. Enormous, bulging, aggressive. And yet the front tires look like they belong on a pickup truck. The mismatch is so extreme, it almost seems like a design mistake. It isn't. Today we're breaking down exactly why tractors have massive rear tires, and after this video, you'll never drive past a farm field the same way again. To understand the scale, picture this. A single rear tire on a modern John Deere 8R series row crop tractor stands roughly 1.8 meters tall. Each one weighs close to 900 kilograms. That's roughly the weight of a full-grown grizzly bear. And on a fully configured machine, there are 4 of them. But here's what nobody tells you. The size has almost nothing to do with carrying the weight of the tractor. It has everything to do with the ground underneath it. Soil is not just dirt. It's a living, layered system full of air pockets, root channels, water pathways, and billions of microorganisms working constantly beneath the surface. Farmers spend years, sometimes entire decades, nursing that underground structure into something productive enough to feed thousands of people. And a heavy machine rolling across it can destroy that structure in a single pass. When a tire compresses soil, it collapses those air pockets and water channels. The particles lock together, and the ground hardens from the inside out. Farmers call this compaction, and it is one of the most expensive, invisible, and misunderstood problems in modern agriculture. Compact the soil, and you've essentially paved it from the inside. Crop roots cannot push through the hardened layers. Rainwater pools on the surface instead of draining down into the earth. Seeds struggle to germinate properly. Yields drop season after season. And unlike a crack in a road or a broken fence post, you cannot simply see compaction damage and fix it. It sits invisible, 60 to 90 centimeters underground, silently destroying productivity for years before most farmers even realize where the problem started. So every single tire that rolls across a working field is either protecting that delicate underground structure or slowly destroying it one pass at a time. Now, here is the part that completely breaks common sense. When most people look at a heavy machine, they assume it needs a big, tough, rigid tire to handle the load. Something solid and stiff, like the tires on a construction excavator or a mining dump truck built to crawl over rocks and gravel. Tractor engineers think in the exact opposite direction. The goal is not a stronger tire. The goal is a larger one. Because the real engineering challenge is not carrying the tractor's weight. It is spreading that weight across the biggest possible footprint, so the pressure pushing down on any single patch of soil stays as low as absolutely possible. This is called ground pressure. It is measured in pounds per square inch, the same unit used to measure the air in a bicycle tire or a basketball. Here is why that number matters so much. A narrow, rigid tire concentrates thousands of kilograms onto a contact patch of a sheet of notebook paper. That is enormous force hammering down onto a tiny area with nowhere to go. The soil beneath it has no choice but to collapse inward. A massive, wide, slightly underinflated tractor tire spreads that exact same load across a contact patch closer to the size of a dining room table. The pressure per square inch drops dramatically. The soil underneath feels only a fraction of the original force. And the living underground structure that took years to build survives the pass almost completely intact. That is the entire engineering logic behind the massive rear tire. Not raw strength, not durability. Surface area. But ground pressure is only half the story, and the second half is where things get genuinely extraordinary. A modern row crop tractor, something like a Case IH Magnum or a Fendt 900 series, working a large grain farm in the American Midwest, produces somewhere between 300 and 500 horsepower at the rear axle. That is an almost incomprehensible amount of rotational force being pushed through 2 rear tires into loose, wet, unpredictable ground. Think carefully about what that actually means in a rain-soaked field after 3 consecutive days of storms. A narrow tire, under that much torque, would do one of exactly 2 things. It would spin helplessly on the surface, flinging mud sideways and going absolutely nowhere useful. Or it would dig straight down into the softened earth like a drill bit, burying itself past the rim within seconds and leaving a tractor stuck in the middle of a field with a planting window closing fast. Neither option gets 40 acres planted before sunset. The massive rear tire solves this through contact area and controlled flex working together. The enormous surface area gives the tire hundreds of individual lug edges gripping soil simultaneously. not skating across the top like a car tire on wet pavement, actually biting into the earth, anchoring each rotation, and converting engine power into forward motion. The sidewall flex is just as important as the overall size. A properly loaded tractor tire does not maintain a perfect circular shape under the machine's weight. It flattens slightly at the bottom, spreading outward where it meets the ground. That controlled flattening increases the contact patch even further than the tire's raw dimensions suggest. More rubber touching soil, more grip surface, more of that engine's enormous power transferred forward instead of wasted as heat and wheel spin. The system works almost exactly like a snowshoe, moving across deep powder snow. A narrow boot concentrates your entire body weight onto a tiny point and sinks straight through the surface. A wide snowshoe distributes that same weight across a large area and keeps you moving efficiently on top. The massive tractor tire is essentially a snowshoe for 5,000 kilograms of steel, diesel engine, and hydraulic machinery moving through soft agricultural earth at planting speed. And here's something most people never notice. The rear tires carry the majority of the tractor's load deliberately, not accidentally. The engine block, the transmission housing, the hydraulic systems, the heaviest components on any modern tractor sit directly above the rear axle by design. That concentrated weight pressing down onto the rear tires is actually useful. It increases traction without requiring engineers to add extra ballast weights to the machine. More weight over the drive wheels means farmers call it getting the job done. Engineers call it intentional weight distribution. The front tires exist to solve a completely different problem. Steering, precision, guidance across row crops, planted within centimeters of each other. Front tires do not transfer torque to the ground. They do not carry the engine's weight. They do not need to grip soft soil under hundreds of horsepower of rotational force. So they stay narrow, responsive, and relatively light, engineered entirely for directional accuracy rather than power transfer. The dramatic size difference you notice driving past that field? It is not a manufacturing quirk or a cost-cutting decision. It is two entirely separate engineering challenges, solved by two completely different tools, bolted onto opposite ends of the same machine. Every time a tractor like a John Deere 8320R pulls a 30-row planter across a wet spring field in Iowa or Kansas, every element of that rear tire works simultaneously. The width protects the soil structure from compaction damage. The lug pattern converts engine torque into forward traction. The sidewall flex maximizes the contact patch dynamically as the load shifts. The shear diameter keeps ground pressure low enough that the harvest happening 6 months later is not being quietly undermined by the planting pass happening right now. It is not simply a big tire machine because someone needed something large enough to fill the wheel well. It is one of the most precisely considered engineering solutions in modern agriculture, sitting in plain sight at the edge of every field, on every highway, in every county you have ever driven through during planting season or harvest. Most people glance at it and see something oversized and industrial. Engineers see ground pressure calculations, torque transfer geometry, soil biology protection, and decades of field testing compressed into a single curved rubber surface, rolling quietly through the mud. And now that you understand what is actually happening under those massive tires, you will never look at a tractor working a field the same way again. And now I'm curious. Have you ever wondered why combine harvesters use completely different tires than tractors, even though a fully loaded combine harvester can weigh nearly twice as much as the tractor pulling equipment in the same field? The answer involves a completely different relationship between harvest timing, surface speed, and crop protection that almost nobody outside agriculture ever thinks about. Subscribe so you don't miss that one. Because once you see what's actually happening underneath a combine rolling through a wheat field at harvest, you'll realize the engineering goes far deeper than anyone standing on the roadside ever suspects.